Hello, I'm John Nicholson and welcome to my YouTube channel. Let's talk about Scotland. As many of you will know, I'm Scottish, you can hear it from my accent, and I am a supporter of Scottish independence, and I was an SNP Member of Parliament from 2015 until the general election last year. For most of that period, I was an SNP Member of Parliament. We've always argued amongst ourselves as independent supporters about the best way of delivering independence. What do you do as an independence movement, entirely committed, as the Scottish independence movement has always been, to peaceful means? What do you do if you're in a union and the big party won't let you go? How do you leave a club if there's no rules for how you leave that club? As we know, in the European Union, the rules are quite clear. The UK showed the clearness of the rules because of Brexit. So when the UK decided to leave the union of states that comprise the European Union said, I don't think you should go. I'm very sad if you do go, but you're entitled to go. That's very different from the United Kingdom. Now, during the independence referendum, we were told that it was a union of equals, and we were begged, please don't leave us, lead us. That's what the Better Together camp said. Now, Scotland voted against independence in 2014. We all know that. But here we are, more than a decade later. By the time the next election comes along, there'll be more than 1 million voters in Scotland who were too young to vote last time round, or who didn't live in Scotland last time round. Now, in a country of only 5.5 million, that's a huge percentage. So for people who say, you've had your say, I would respond with the obvious. Folk who were too young to vote in 2014 are now in their mid-20s, and voters have the right to change their mind. That's why we have elections. It's called democracy. Now, I have no trouble at all with people who say they want to campaign against Scottish independence. That is their entitlement in a democracy. But what people don't have the right to do is to say that Scotland can't decide its own future. So whenever I debate unionists, politicians, or journalists, I always ask the same question. How do we leave? What are the rules? And they can never, ever answer. Well, the First Minister John Swinney made his view clear over the last week. He said that the next Holyrood elections to the Scottish Parliament next year, which the SNP are expected to win, that will be a de facto referendum on having a referendum. In other words, if the SNP win, and as he put it, win a majority of seats, he will take that as the green light to negotiate with the United Kingdom government for a referendum on independence. Now, I see a problem with that. First of all, I think it's going to be very tough to win a majority in the Scottish Parliament for the SNP, because the whole Parliament was set up to make it virtually impossible for there ever to be a party that wins a majority. That's what the drafters of the devolution settlement set out to do, in order to persuade parties to negotiate together, as the Liberals did with the Labour Party, or as the Greens and the SNP have done over the last decade that the SNP has been in government. So it's a very tall ask. But even if it's achieved, what happens if, despite winning a majority, the UK government under Keir Starmer, who used to say it was up to the Scots to decide, but has U-turned on this as so much else, what happens if the UK government says no? I've yet to read any clear arguments that explain to me what the SNP plan is in that eventuality. Now, of course, from Labour's perspective, they may feel that saying no over and over again, as the Tories did, will make the SNP and pro-independence Scots simply go away. But I have to say, there's no signs that that's happening, support for independence is gradually easing up and up and up. And the demographics are especially interesting because the only group now that is opposed to Scottish independence are the over 65s. And the younger you are, the more enthusiastic you are about Scottish independence. So all the folk who've grown up with a Scottish Parliament support the idea of there being a Scottish Parliament, not only with domestic, but with international powers, a fully independent country like Denmark, with which we share so many similarities. But there's another crucial factor here too. Young Scots want to rejoin the European Union and have all the freedoms that my generation enjoyed to live, work, love and travel without impediment throughout the whole of the European Union. Why should they not? So clearly, the challenge is to say to the 55% of Scots who voted tell us repeatedly in every poll that's ever taken at the moment that they support independence, that they must vote for independence, and the only way of doing that is by voting for the SNP. That's one challenge. But the other challenge is to plan what we're going to do if number 10 Downing Street and Westminster says no. But as somebody who's been a journalist over many decades, something that always strikes me is that countries become independent unexpectedly. The Baltic states, the Soviet Union and then Russia said no initially. Slovenia, Yugoslavia said no initially. Slovakia, of course, nobody expected Slovakia to become an independent country, and the people of Slovakia didn't particularly want it. It was their politicians who drove through independence. So, although it seems that you reach a dead end and there's no immediate signals of where to go next, sometimes history surprises us, and I've got a feeling that will happen in Scotland. But please do let me know your views. You can subscribe to the channel, it costs absolutely nothing, or leave your views underneath. I always do my very best to answer. And thanks again for watching.